distance, and distance is just used to describe the length between 2 points. And it's always positive. And distance is length. Length and distance are always positive because it doesn't matter which direction you go. If I walk a mile and I walk it walking forwards, or if I walk a mile and I walk it walking backwards, I still walked a mile. Because I walked backwards, I did not walk a negative mile, right? So distance is always positive. That's a good thing to remember, so that if you're working these out, if you get a negative number, you'll know that something went wrong somewhere. The midpoint is the point that is exactly halfway between two other points. So it's equidistant, which means it's equally distant to both points. It's the halfway point. A bisector is any point, line, segment, plane, or ray that intersects a midpoint. Bisect means to cut in half. So we can bisect a line segment that we cut it in half at the midpoint. Okay, if you count the spaces, it doesn't matter which direction you go, you're just counting spaces. But if you subtract, you want to subtract the lesser from the greater. That way you make sure that you get the right sign. Okay. So if I'm just counting and I want to find the length of BE, I go from B to E and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Counting's pretty simple, straightforward. AC, 1, 2, 3. Now if I'm subtracting, I want to subtract, okay, C and F. C is -4, F is 5. So I'm going to do the lesser from the greater. And this is my little thing, this double negative, and then it's a smiley man. And smiley people are positive. That's just my little way to remember double negatives make you a positive. So, okay. If we're doing F and B, F is still 5, B is -6. So I'm going to do 5 minus -6. 6 is 11. Now here's why I said you have to do the larger or greater minus the lesser. If I went the other way and I did B minus F, I would get -11. Which is okay, except that length is not negative. So you'd have to take the absolute value of it at this point and say it's 11. So it's just easier to remember to always do the greater minus the lesser, and then you always get the correct sign. Does that make sense? If you remember the right order, then you don't have to worry about the signs. Okay, so that's distance on a number line. We won't do a whole lot of that, to be honest with you. We'll mostly do distance on a coordinate plane. So we're going to have x's and y's. Okay. Basically what that means is I'll have some point out here in space and some point out here in space, and I'll find this distance, the length between them. Okay. And in order to find that, we're going to use the distance formula. Okay. These numbers at the bottom, they're called subsets. They're just telling you that there are 2 different x's and 2 different y's. You've probably seen those before, yes? Yeah. Okay. This is derived from the Pythagorean theorem, because if I have 2 points, I can make a triangle, A and B and C is equal to the square root of A squared plus B squared. because a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And to find a, I'm subtracting the y's. And to find b, I'm subtracting the x's. So these are a and b. That's where this comes from. So just visually, that's what you're doing. You're making a triangle essentially to find the distance, except you're skipping the part where you actually make the triangle to find the distance. You don't have to actually draw it out. Back in the day, that's, okay, so to find the distance between these, you label them x1, y1, and x2, y2. And it doesn't matter. These can be x2, y2, and this could be x1, y1, or vice versa. The only thing you can't do is put a 1 and a 2 in the same parentheses. So be really careful with that. Just they're both 1s or they're both 2s. And then you plug them in to our formula, which I'm drawing way too low. X1 is -4, x2 is 5, y1 is -6, y2 is -1, and remember it's minus y2, so it's minus a negative, and that is positive. So this is actually going to be -9 squared plus -6 plus 1 squared, which is -9 squared plus -5 squared. Now, you'll notice I'm leaving the negatives in the parentheses, and there's a reason I'm doing that. This and this are not the same thing. Does everybody remember that? Okay, because this is -81 and this is +81. And we're squaring what's inside the parentheses, so we want +81. And +25, and that is 106. And you can leave it just like that because it's not a perfect square. And it's not simplifiable. When we talk about midpoint, midpoint is an actual point. It's not a length, so we're finding coordinates. So we're going to be finding like an actual coordinate pair, x and y. And the formula for that is m, which is the midpoint, is equal to x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And this will tell us the coordinates of the point that is exactly halfway between x1, y1, and x2, y2. So just like we do with distance, we have to assign x1, y1, and x2, y2 to the points. And we just plug those into the formula. So I have -6 plus 1 divided by 2, and 3 plus 0 divided by 2, which gives me -5 over 2 and 3 over 2. And those don't divide evenly, so I'm going to leave it exactly like this. That's our midpoint. The middle and an end, and we have to find the other end. That's what's happening here. Now there's two ways to do this. There's the algebraic way, and then there's the way that I can show you that does not actually involve algebra. It depends on how your brain functions. So I'm going to show you the algebra way, and then I'll show you the same problem without algebra. And then you can do the other, practice problems or whatever, however you want to. I don't care. Just so long as you can get there. So for the algebra way, it would help if I changed colors so you could see. Can you check our notes? No. They're for you, not for me. Okay, we have the midpoint equals x1 plus x2 and y1. Okay, k is the midpoint. K is the midpoint. So this replaces m. And x1, y1, we're missing x2, y2. So what we do is we set this up where k replaces m. x1 is 3, I don't know x2. And y1 is negative 5, I don't know y2. Now when we used the midpoint going from the ends to the middle, I add these together, divide by 2, and I get an x coordinate. So what this tells me is this part right here equals negative 1. And this part right here equals 2. So I can set them each equal. I can say 3 plus x2 divided by 2 equals negative 1. And negative 5 plus y2 divided by 2 equals 2. So I can take the midpoint and I get 2 equations out of this. To solve these, I need to multiply by 2, which will cancel those 2's out. So I get 3 plus x2 is equal to negative 2. Subtract 3. And I get x2 is equal to negative 5. Here, I multiplied both sides by 2 to cancel this 2 out. Because this is 3 plus x divided by 2, so to get rid of divided by 2, I multiply by 2. Because it's the opposite. We always do the opposite. Well, yeah, well, we were dividing before, so we're multiplying now. So we're going backwards. So on this one, we'll do the same thing. Because this is divided by 2, I'm going to multiply by 2. And those 2's will cancel each other out. And I get negative 5 plus y2 is equal to 4. Add 5 to both sides. And I get y2 is equal to 9. So my end is negative 5, 9. Okay. So same problem, different method. To solve this without algebra, we do 2 times the midpoint minus the endpoint, first endpoint, and we get the second endpoint. Okay, so 2 times k minus the end. Okay, now you have to distribute in this negative, and you have to distribute in this 2. So this turns into negative 2, 4, and negative 3, positive 5. Negative 2 and negative 3 is negative 5, 4 and 5 is 9. Algebra. You know how before we had one piece plus the other piece equal the whole, and that's the word we saw was between. K is between J and L or whatever. Here we have Q is the midpoint. When I see midpoint, what that tells me is this piece and this piece are the same length. So instead of saying one plus the other equals the whole, like I did with between, I have this piece equals this piece. Does that make sense? Because they're the same length. So 9y minus 2 will equal 14 plus 5y. Subtract the 5y. I'm going to get 4y minus 2 equals 14, which I'm going to move up here because I ran out of space. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. 4y equals 16. Divide by 4, and y equals 4. And I'm not trying to find y, I'm trying to find PQ. PQ is 9y minus 2. Y is 4. So that's going to be 36 minus 2. So PQ is 34. Once I draw the picture, I can label xy is 2x minus 3. And yz is 27 minus 4x. And y is a midpoint, which tells me that this length and this length are the same. So to solve that, I'm going to set those equal to each other. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides. So I'm going to get 6x minus 3 is equal to 27. Add 3 to both sides. 6x equals 30, so that makes x 5. I want to find yz, which is 27 minus 4x. X is 5, so that's 27 minus 20. So yz is 7.